Sky 7 over the scene of what police are now calling a double homicide.
For the first time, California Governor Gavin Newsom has publicly acknowledged that he is open to a run for the White House.
In LA, homelessness has jumped 16% in a year. Half of Americans living on the streets are in California.
Over 4,500 years ago, with nothing more than ropes, levers, ramps, and the sheer force of human ingenuity and determination, the ancient Egyptians constructed the Great Pyramid of Giza. This is the only surviving wonder of the ancient world, a staggering 481-foot-tall, 5.75 million-ton masterpiece. Built from 2.3 million precisely cut stone blocks, they finished it in roughly 20 to 27 years, and for thousands of years afterward, it stood as the tallest structure known to man. It has endured, it has inspired, it has lasted. Fast forward to ancient Rome, where in just 8 to 10 years, they raised the Colosseum, that colossal amphitheater, capable of seating 50,000 people, complete with underground tunnels for dramatic entrances, retractable awnings to shield the crowd from the sun, and engineering precision that still leaves modern architects in awe. In India, Emperor Shah Jahan set out to honor his beloved wife and created the Taj Mahal, that breathtaking white marble mausoleum of perfect symmetry and intricate inlays. 20,000 artisans brought it to completion in about 22 years. Even the Colossus of Rhodes, that massive bronze statue towering proudly over the harbor, was erected in roughly 12 years. These were not mere buildings, my friends. These were bold statements of human ambition, power, creativity, and possibility. They were built with the most basic hand tools and limited technology by determined people who actually finished what they started. They were completed in years, or at most a couple of decades, and they have endured for centuries, sometimes millennia. They worked, they inspired generations, and they lasted. Now, my friends, let's compare that timeless human achievement to what we see in modern-day California. Back in 2008, California voters were promised a gleaming, futuristic, high-speed rail system that would connect Los Angeles to San Francisco. The price tag they were sold? Around $33 billion. The completion date? Around 2020. It was going to be a marvel of modern transportation. Well, 18 long years later, what do we have? More than 13 to 15 billion of taxpayer money has been poured into this project, and there are still no operational high-speed trains running anywhere. Nothing. Zip. Zilch. All we've got are some partial structures sitting out in the Central Valley. The latest estimates for finishing even the core segment? $126 billion, or depending on which optimistic fantasy the bureaucrats are peddling this week, all the way up to $231 billion. With any real service perhaps slipping into the 2030s or even the 2040s, if it ever happens at all. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the infamous train to nowhere. It is a project so bloated, so delayed, and so utterly incompetent that it makes those ancient wonders look like models of ruthless efficiency. Now, wait a minute. Before we dismiss this disaster entirely, let's go back and examine exactly how this voter-approved dream turned into one of the most expensive punchlines in the entire history of infrastructure. High-speed rail ideas had been floating around California since the 1970s. Jerry Brown talked about it. They studied it. In 1996, the state legislature created the California High-Speed Rail Authority, another shiny new layer of bureaucracy whose job was to plan this thing for more than a decade. Then came the big sales job in 2008, right in the middle of the financial crisis. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator himself, stepped up and personally championed the Proposition 1A. The pitch to the voters was pure gold-plated fantasy. Just approve $9.95 billion in bonds as seed money. We will build a world-class high-speed rail system linking San Francisco to Los Angeles. The total cost will be around $33 billion. These trains will hit 220 miles per hour. You'll go from San Francisco to LA in 2 hours and 40 minutes. It'll be up and running by around 2020. It'll pay for itself with profits, create jobs, and deliver a green future for all. 53% of Californians bought that fairy tale and voted yes. Fast forward to the big ceremonial groundbreaking in Fresno in January 2015. 7 years after the vote, because, they needed more planning, politicians showed up in hard hats, cut ribbons, gave soaring speeches about vision and the future. They started in the Central Valley because everyone told them it was going to be the easy starter section. And then, my friends, reality slammed into this project like a freight train made entirely of lawsuits, red tape, and breathtaking incompetence. The cost didn't merely rise, they exploded. Successive business plans after the vote quietly revised the numbers upward again and again. By the time we reach 2026, the estimates for even phase one have ballooned to $126 billion, or as high as $231 billion, in the unvarnished, unoptimized version. That's not inflation. That is not some series of unforeseeable surprises. That is a $13.8 billion bonfire of taxpayer dollars already burning bright. And still, we have 0 high-speed trains in operation. Just 119 miles of half-finished guideway sitting out in the middle of nowhere. Some fancy viaducts leading precisely nowhere, and vague promises of an initial operating segment that might start limping along around 2032 if the stars align and the excuses hold. Why did this happen? Let's break it down for the average person at home. No engineering degree required. The original sin was lying to the voters with fairy tale numbers. They lowballed the cost on purpose to get the bond passed. It was like promising your spouse a simple $10,000 kitchen remodel and then acting shocked when the contractor hands you a bill for $200,000. The bond measure never asked for enough money to finish the job. Classic bait and switch. Then they made the catastrophic decision to start digging before they had secured the land, finished the designs, or even moved the power lines and irrigation canals out of the way. Imagine deciding to build a deck in your backyard. Would you pour the concrete first and then start arguing with the neighbor about where the property line actually is? Of course not. But that is precisely what the High-Speed Rail Authority did. They broke ground in 2015 before they owned all the farmland, before the designs were truly complete, and while utility companies were still scrambling. The result? Years of lawsuits from farmers, endless eminent domain battles, and hundreds of millions in expensive change orders just to fix their own preventable mistakes. The state auditor called them out years ago for flawed decision-making and poor contract management. They also chose one of the most expensive, headache-inducing routes imaginable and congratulated themselves for being smart. The Central Valley was supposed to be the easy part. Flat land, right? Wrong. It is covered in almond orchards, irrigation ditches the size of small rivers, and freight tracks that all had to be dealt with. So now they are erecting skyscraper-tall bridges over everything, all while California's favorite sport, endless environmental reviews and litigation, tied the entire project in regulatory knots for over a decade. The ancient Egyptians moved 2.3 million stone blocks using nothing but ramps and ropes. California can't manage to relocate a few power poles without forming another committee. Add to that a bureaucracy on steroids, with consultants everywhere and no one truly accountable. Instead of hiring experienced builders who know how to finish projects on time and on budget, they paid armies of lawyers, planners, and consultants who got rich whether the train ever moved an inch or not. Contracts were constantly rewritten. Costs skyrocketed with change order after change order. No one had any skin in the game. Politicians got their ribbon-cutting photo opportunities. Consultants cashed their checks. And the taxpayers? We got dirt, lawsuits, and excuses. And let us not forget the man who has presided over much of this slow-motion train wreck, Gavin Newsom. He became governor in 2019. He talked a big game about getting real and supposedly scaling the project back to the realistic bookends. But what actually happened under his watch? The money spigot stayed wide open. Billions more flowed into that Central Valley black hole. Costs continued to balloon. Service dates kept slipping further into the future. The 2026 business plan, released on his administration's watch, was so sloppy, so lacking in transparency, and so full of major unannounced changes, single track sections, suburban station moves, that state lawmakers accused it of violating the law and had to delay the vote. Newsom still steps up to defend the project and calls it back on track, even as realistic projections push full service out toward 2040. He inherited a mess, but he chose to keep funding it, defending it, and kicking the can down the road. That is leadership by press conference, not by results. $15 billion spent so far. 0 high-speed trains in operation. Just concrete monuments to failure slowly rotting in the Central Valley sun. This is not some complicated set of infrastructure challenges, my friends. This is what happens when government ignores every basic, common sense rule of actually building something. Plan honestly from the beginning. Budget realistically. Secure the land first. Move the utilities before you start pouring concrete. Hire people who know how to finish the job. Stick to the plan instead of rewriting it every time the cost goes up. While the pharaohs of ancient Egypt built pyramids that are still standing after 4,500 years, California has spent nearly 2 decades building nothing but excuses and a perpetual taxpayer-funded jobs program with no off switch. Folks, this is the ultimate symbol of a state and a political culture that talks a great game, spends other people's money with wild abandon, regulates everything to death, and somehow manages to build almost nothing of lasting value. California taxpayers did not vote for a never-ending Central Valley art installation. They voted for a train. Instead, they got the most expensive, slowest moving, most embarrassing train to nowhere in human history. How much more of this clown show are we supposed to fund before we finally admit the truth and pull the plug on this disaster? The ancient wonders lasted for millennia. This embarrassment has already humiliated California for nearly 2 decades, and it is still somehow going absolutely nowhere. This is Drew Allen with the Daily Signal.